My younger brother Ethan and I worked transporting fuel across the Midwest, and that week we were on a long route that cut through part of Wyoming. We'd been driving since early morning, and a GPS detour put us on a completely isolated gravel road, the kind where you drive for half an hour without seeing a house, a pole, or another vehicle. The sun had already disappeared behind the hills and the temperature was dropping fast. The tanker truck vibrated more than usual because of the uneven road, and I was focused on keeping the steering steady while Ethan checked the map on his phone, complaining that the GPS shouldn't have sent us that way. There was no signal, no anything besides the sound of gravel hitting the fenders. It was just us, the truck, and that feeling of being too far from any help if something went wrong. A few miles later, we saw a faint light ahead, as if there were a vehicle stopped on the shoulder. When we got closer, we realized it was an ordinary truck, red, but clearly old. The cab door was open, the interior light was on, and the driver's door hung wide open, swaying slightly in the wind. We didn't see anyone around. No fresh footprints in the gravel, no flashlight, nothing. Ethan rolled the window down a bit to try to hear if someone was calling out, but all we could hear was the wind cutting across the empty road. The whole scene felt wrong, like someone had run out of there in a hurry and never come back. I passed slowly out of caution, looking in the mirror. At that exact moment, the interior light of the other truck flickered once, as if it had just received power. I remember saying, "That wasn't on like that before." When we were about 30 feet ahead, Ethan turned to me with a strange expression and said he had heard something, like a metallic click coming from the parked truck. Before I could ask, the rearview mirror lit up. The red truck's headlights suddenly turned on, bright and aimed directly at the back of our tanker. I jumped in my seat thinking someone had come back and was trying to get our attention, but the first thing I noticed was the steering wheel, completely still. No one was sitting there. The cab was empty, exactly as we had seen seconds earlier. The engine roared loudly, that heavy growl of an old motor, and the truck started moving, slowly at first, like it was pulling out of an invisible parking spot. Ethan kept repeating, "There's nobody in there, there's nobody in there," almost breathless, and I hit the accelerator without thinking. Gravel flew everywhere as I tried to gain distance, but the road was uneven and the tanker couldn't go too fast without risking stability. Even so, the red truck came after us faster and faster, and its headlights shook as if the body was loose. The strangest part was that it didn't drive in a straight line. It moved as if it were following our exact trajectory, adjusting its direction millimeter by millimeter, but with no one holding the steering wheel. I could clearly see the empty cab through the mirror, lit by its own interior light. That made me more nervous than any real chase would have. I didn't know whether to stop, speed up, or try some maneuver because nothing about that situation made sense. It was a heavy truck, out of control, yet somehow guided. The chase lasted long enough for me to lose all sense of distance. The gravel road curved slowly between open areas, and every time I thought we'd gained a few more feet, the red truck showed up again in the mirror, always aligned, always too close. Ethan turned on his phone flashlight and pointed it out the window toward the truck behind us, as if that would help us see inside the cab better. It didn't. The light only confirmed what we already knew. There was no one in the seat. No shadow, no movement, only the driver's door swaying slightly as if wind were passing through it and that strong headlight glare vibrating. At one point, the truck accelerated so abruptly that the engine sound choked, like it was being pushed beyond its limit. It was impossible not to think it could hit us from behind at any second. I started honking for no real reason, just because my body needed to do something while I tried to keep our truck on track. Ethan kept trying to call the police, but there was no signal. The screen just showed "no service" over and over. The frustration of having no way to call for help made everything worse. I kept trying to convince myself it was some mechanical malfunction, or maybe someone hidden we just couldn't see. But with every curve, that explanation got less believable. The truck moved as if it had intention, not like a vehicle out of control. And then, without warning, everything changed. After a wider curve, I noticed in the mirror that the red truck's headlights began to flash. Not randomly, but in a short pattern, almost like someone was repeatedly hitting the high beam switch. A cold wave hit my stomach so hard that it took me a second to react. When the headlights started flashing like that, my first instinct was to slow down, because it looked like the truck was trying to respond to something I was doing. But as soon as I lifted my foot slightly off the pedal, the red truck did the opposite. It accelerated hard, kicking up a huge cloud of dust behind it. The engine noise got louder, almost metallic, like some part was vibrating loose. I accelerated again and the flashing suddenly stopped. The truck kept approaching, but it didn't seem as coordinated as before. It started swaying slightly left and right, as if it were losing stability. Ethan looked at me with an expression I had never seen on him before and said, "It's not following the road and it's following us." That sentence hit me straight in the head because that was exactly how it had felt from the beginning. Then, on a straight stretch, the truck behind us began slowing down by itself. It wasn't a sudden stop. It was like the engine was dying while still moving forward. I kept accelerating but kept watching the mirror, waiting for some movement, some attempt to come after us again. Nothing. The headlights dimmed, then went completely dark, and the truck just stayed there in the middle of the road, still surrounded by the dust it had kicked up seconds earlier. I only stopped looking when its lights were out of sight. Even after that, I kept my foot pressed on the accelerator as if it might start up again at any moment. The silence inside the cab was immediate, almost violent. Ethan finally exhaled and said we should call someone as soon as we had signal. I agreed, but my body was so tense my hands were still trembling on the steering wheel. A few minutes later, when we finally got signal, Ethan called the state police and told them everything. The dispatcher asked us to find a safe place to pull over and wait for a patrol car. We parked in a small dirt pull-off near a fence, still shaking from the adrenaline. While we waited, we kept checking the mirror repeatedly, trying to see if any light appeared far behind us, but the road was completely dark. No sound, no headlights, nothing. Just that heavy silence of remote places. Ethan still insisted it must have been a mechanical failure or some kind of automatic trigger, but you could see on his face he didn't believe what he was saying. I also tried to rationalize it, but the image of the empty cab, lit, chasing us for miles didn't leave space for much logical explanation. When the officer arrived, an older man, the type who looked like he had seen everything, we immediately asked not to go back the same way. He asked us to explain everything from the beginning and wrote it down without showing any surprise. That was what made me the most uncomfortable. When we finished, he stood for a few seconds looking down the road before saying, "That truck, you're not the first ones to see it." The way he said that made my stomach turn. I asked what he meant and he replied very directly, "Always in the same area. Always on secondary roads, almost always after some trucker goes missing." He said it without changing his tone, as if stating a simple fact, but the phrase kept pounding in my head. I felt a hot wave rise up my neck, like my body understood something my mind didn't want to accept. I asked if anyone had ever tried following the truck or figuring out where it came from. He said yes, that patrol cars had gone after it on other occasions, but it always played out the same way. The vehicle appeared in remote stretches, chased a specific target for a few miles, and when they began to get close, it would simply stop, shut off, and remain there as if it had never moved. Officers would write down the plate, check the registration, but the number didn't match any active vehicle in the state for years. According to him, the original truck had belonged to a driver who went missing in the area nearly a decade earlier. I didn't know how to respond to that. I just stared at the empty road, trying not to imagine the illuminated cab coming after us again. Ethan, normally more skeptical than I am, was pale, saying nothing. The officer recommended we avoid that detour and stick to the main route, even if it took longer. He said he couldn't state anything officially, but experienced truckers in the region had reported similar stories. Always a lone truck, always on secondary roads, always with some detail that didn't add up. He added that in the rare times they had found the vehicle stopped, there were never signs of a driver, no recent fingerprints, no footprints. It was as if no one had touched it in years, despite all the witnessed chases. That gave me a strange feeling, almost physical, like my skin had tightened around my body. It wasn't fear of something supernatural. It was fear of something that had no explanation, and yet seemed to recognize lone truckers on isolated roads. After the officer left, we stayed in the cab for a few more minutes, trying to catch our breath before getting back on the road. Ethan held the steering wheel with both hands, even with the truck turned off, like he needed that physical stability to not lose it. I tried not to look in the mirror, but every time I turned my face in that direction, my body reacted automatically, expecting to see two headlights appear from nowhere. We continued driving slowly, not talking much. The company radio stayed on the whole time just to give the feeling that someone else was there with us. At some point in the early morning, we finally returned to the main highway, and only then did I feel my chest loosen a little. I had never been so relieved to see other cars passing by. When we arrived at the truck stop where we would sleep, even before turning off the engine, we agreed we would never again take secondary routes unless absolutely necessary, and that if any detour seemed strange, we would turn back even if the GPS insisted. To this day, every time I drive at night on an empty road, I end up checking the mirror more than I should. I don't expect to see anything, but my body learned to react before the thought. The officer said the truck had chased other drivers before. I don't know if I believe that literally, but I know what I saw. A heavy vehicle, moving, headlights on, with no person controlling it. No one behind the wheel, no one in the cab. Just the sound of the engine and the feeling that it was following us, not the road. Story 2. I was 14 at the time and living with my grandparents on a ranch far from everything in rural New Mexico. It was one of those places where you hear more wind and gravel than cars passing by. My grandparents raised cattle, and that day I was waiting for a large feed delivery, something that was already part of the routine. Usually I just checked the invoice, helped the driver unload, and then he went on his way. Nothing special. The sun was strong, the air was dry, and I was sitting on the fence looking at the dirt road, which was basically a straight line until it disappeared into the desert. When I finally saw the semi kicking up dust in the distance, I stood up and went to the gate. There was nothing unusual about the truck. Normal model, slightly worn paint, no company logo. It just looked old. When it parked, I noticed the driver seemed more agitated than any other who had come before. He got out of the cab too fast, almost tripping, and kept looking around as if expecting someone to appear behind me. The way he avoided looking directly at me already made me uncomfortable. When he finally spoke to me, his voice sounded forced, slightly shaky. He asked if my grandparents were home. Then he asked if I stayed alone there often. I didn't really answer, I just said I was waiting for the delivery invoice. But he kept asking things that had nothing to do with the job. My age, where I studied, whether I helped around the ranch at night too. With each question he stepped a little closer, gripping the clipboard too tightly as if trying to look professional but failing. I tried to change the subject, pointing at the trailer and asking where the feed bags were, but he ignored me completely. Instead, he asked my name, something normal, so I told him just my first name. But he insisted, "Your full name, kid," as it appears on the invoice. That froze me because no other driver had ever asked that. They always looked at the paper, checked my grandfather's signature, and that was it. Before I could answer, he said my last name himself, in a low voice, almost clipping the words. That made my entire body shiver. I had never seen that man in my life and had definitely not said my last name at any point. He noticed my reaction and smiled in a strange way, as if he had said it on purpose. That was when I began to feel a real sense of danger, something I didn't know how to identify at the time, but today I understand as my body's warning. After I told him the invoice was with my grandfather, he went silent for a few seconds, just staring at me. Then he said, "Come here for a second. I want to show you something in the trailer." The way he said it didn't sound like a request for help nor anything technical. It sounded too insistent. He walked to the back of the trailer and opened one of the metal doors, motioning for me to get inside, like it was the most normal thing ever. The inside was dark, with only a sliver of light hitting the feed bags in the back. I stopped where I was, told him I didn't need to go in there, that my grandfather preferred unloading when he arrived. The driver tilted his head, still holding the door open, and repeated, "Just a second, get in." His tone was colder this time. My stomach dropped. I stepped back without even realizing I was doing it. I said I couldn't get in because my grandparents told me not to climb into any truck. That was a lie, but it was the first thing that came to mind. The driver didn't like that. His face tightened and he slapped his hand against the side of the trailer as if losing patience. "Nobody will know. It's just a second," he repeated, now without any smile. My heart was racing. I looked quickly toward the road, imagining if someone might show up, but I knew they wouldn't. That stretch had no movement at that time of day. When I realized he was starting to come around the open trailer door, as if trying to block me from backing away, I stepped back again. He followed my movement with his eyes, not with his body, like he was measuring distance. That was when he did something I never forgot. He said my full name again, clearly, without hesitation. It didn't sound like someone reading it. It sounded like someone who already knew it. That paralyzed me. My body went completely rigid, and at the same time everything inside me screamed for me to run. But run where? The ranch was open, with no high fences, but there was also no one around. I said I was going to get my grandfather and started backing toward the house. The driver took 2 steps forward, stopping exactly in the middle of the ranch entrance, where the dirt road narrowed. He had parked the truck sideways, completely blocking the exit, and stood there watching me. His arms relaxed, body still, but his eyes fixed on me, unblinking. I remember feeling like he was deciding something. I tried to call for my grandfather, but my voice wouldn't come out properly. It wasn't a scream, it was almost a hoarse whisper because I was so scared it felt like my throat had closed. The driver didn't move, just followed my steps with his eyes as if waiting for me to make the wrong choice. The blocked exit left me with no route, and the distance between us felt smaller every second, even though he didn't take a single step. I tried to think of anything that could help, running back to the house, going into the barn, hiding behind the water tank. But fear made my thoughts slow. The hot desert wind hit my face, but all I could smell was diesel mixed with something metallic coming from the open trailer. Then he spoke, for the first time since blocking the road. "You should have gotten in when I asked." The sentence came in a strange tone, not angry, but not trying to sound friendly either. I froze instantly. He put his hand in his pocket as if to grab something, and that was enough for my body to react before my mind did. I turned and ran back into the ranch, kicking up dust behind me, not daring to look back. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would tear through my chest. When I reached the porch, I finally managed to shout, and my grandfather threw the door open with a look that showed he immediately understood something was very wrong. He looked past me, saw the truck blocking the entrance and the man standing there, and his expression changed. An instant mix of protection and real concern. My grandfather stepped down the porch stairs without taking his eyes off the driver. He didn't shout, didn't approach, just stood between me and the man like a shield. The driver didn't react at first. He only tilted his head slightly, as if evaluating my grandfather the same way he had evaluated me. The trailer door was still open, swaying in the wind, and you could see the dark interior behind him. The silence was so heavy that I still remember the sound of my own blood in my ears. My grandfather firmly asked if there was any issue with the delivery. The driver took a while to respond, as if he had forgotten why he was there. Then he said without emotion, he needed to see something. My grandfather said the delivery could be unloaded right there at the entrance and that he would handle the rest, but the man didn't answer. He just kept looking at me over my grandfather's shoulder. The tension was so intense that even I, a kid at the time, felt something was deeply wrong about the driver's posture. He wasn't angry. He wasn't confused. He seemed deliberate, like he was about to do something but hadn't found the right moment. My grandfather took 1 step forward and rested his hand on his hip, where he usually carried an old radio. But the driver didn't know that he wasn't wearing it that day. Still, that simple shift in posture made the man blink for the first time since blocking the exit. He looked at the road, then at the house, then at me, like he was calculating something. Then he slammed the trailer door shut, climbed into the cab without taking his eyes off my grandfather, and started the engine. He stayed there for a few seconds, as if waiting for us to make a move. We didn't. Only then did he slowly reverse, straightening the truck out of the entrance. When it finally aligned with the road, I thought he was going to leave. But that's not what happened. The driver kept the truck parked there, engine running, taking up almost the entire width of the dirt road. He put his arm out the window, but didn't wave, didn't say anything. He just stared at us, completely still, like he was waiting for my grandfather to step inside the house so he could try something with me again. The engine vibrated irregularly, and for a moment I thought he was going to get out. My grandfather stayed firm, not stepping back, not moving his hand from his hip. The tension was so thick I could feel it on my skin, like the air had gotten heavier, hotter. 3, maybe 4 minutes passed with him just watching, motionless, as if evaluating whether he should attempt something else. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, he simply turned the wheel, maneuvered slowly, and drove back down the road he had come from. Not in a hurry, not frustrated. He didn't look back. He didn't speed away like someone who had missed an opportunity. He just left. The sound of the truck fading into the desert echoed long after it disappeared. My grandfather stood there watching until the dust settled. Then he turned to me and said, in a tone I had never heard from him before, "You never go near a truck alone again, never." He went inside, grabbed the landline phone, and tried calling the delivery company. No answer. Tried again. Nothing. It was as if that driver wasn't registered anywhere. The silence on the other end of the line was almost as frightening as the man's stare. A few minutes later, my grandmother appeared asking what was going on. My grandfather didn't give details, just said we needed to lock everything up and wait before heading out to the pasture. He locked the iron gate as if that would make any difference against a truck that size. I was still shaking, and I remember washing my face several times, trying to feel something other than fear. When I asked my grandfather how the man knew my full name, he went silent. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because any answer would be bad. Later that afternoon, when we called the company responsible for the delivery, the attendant said no driver had been sent at that time. The delivery, according to her, was scheduled for the next day. I froze. It was impossible. I had seen the invoice in his hand. But she insisted. No one from their team had passed through that route that day. That night, my grandfather left a shotgun leaning against the bedroom wall and told me not to open the door for anyone, even if they called me by name. That sentence stayed with me for years. To this day, I remember the face of that man standing on the road as if he were trying to decide what to do with me. There was no chase, no attempt to force his way into the ranch. But there was something worse. Intention. An intention I was too young to understand. But that became clear when I realized how he said my name. How he tried to lure me into the trailer. How he blocked the exit for no reason. I never saw that truck again, nor that driver. But even today, when I see an old red semi with a worn cab, my body reacts before my mind does. That feeling comes back in full as if I were 14 again, standing in the desert sun, being watched by someone who should not have known who I was. Story 3. My husband and I were driving through Colorado on our way to Utah, taking a long trip to visit his family. Our dog, Milo, was in the back seat, tired from being on the road all day. It was already past 9 at night when we stopped at an almost empty rest area, one of those in the middle of a long stretch of highway, with only bathrooms, vending machines, and a few parked trucks. The place had lighting that was too bright in some spots and too dark in others, a contrast that had always given me a strange feeling. I needed to use the bathroom quickly before we continued driving, so I left my husband waiting in the car with Milo and walked toward the restrooms, which were near 2 large semi-trucks parked side by side. Everything was too quiet except for the sound of the wind passing between the trailers. When I came back, the first thing I noticed was a sequence of headlights turning on and off behind the 2 trucks, as if someone were deliberately testing the lights. I thought it was weird because none of the engines were running and it didn't look like there was a driver in either of them. The parking lot was almost entirely empty, except for those 2 trucks and our car. As I walked back, I tried to ignore the feeling that something was moving between the trailers, shadow against shadow. Then suddenly, a male figure stepped out from between the 2 trucks, not running but walking fast, straight toward me. He didn't say anything, didn't raise his hands, didn't wave, he just came. He seemed determined, as if he already knew exactly where I was. My body reacted before my mind did. My pace quickened and my throat went dry. At first, I tried convincing myself he might be the driver of one of the trucks heading to the bathroom, but the closer he got, the less that made sense. He wasn't walking toward the restrooms. He was walking toward me, and he didn't look away even for a second. The way his steps sped up when mine did sent a shock of adrenaline through me like nothing I'd ever felt. I glanced quickly toward our car, which was about 50 meters away, and saw my husband looking at his phone, completely unaware of what was happening. I called his name, but my voice came out low, shaky, like when you try to talk during a nightmare. The man kept coming, now much faster, his hard footsteps echoing between the trucks. I changed direction and tried looping around the back of a parked pickup truck, but he changed direction too, as if trying to intercept me. That was the moment I felt real, physical fear. the kind that makes your legs lose strength. He was close enough now that I could see he wasn't carrying a bag, flashlight, or anything that would indicate he was a driver. His clothes were too neutral: dark t-shirt, loose pants. Nothing that looked like a uniform or identification. When I realized he was less than 10 meters away, I finally managed to scream my husband's name loudly. The response was immediate. He looked up instantly, saw me running, and opened the car door so fast that Milo started barking as if he sensed the danger before understanding the scene. The man didn't hesitate here. He tried to grab me. I felt his hand touch my arm for a fraction of a second, but I yanked myself backward and turned toward the car. It was instinct, not a thought-out decision. His touch was strange, cold, almost rigid, as if he were gripping hard before he even reached me. When I turned to run, I heard his footsteps speeding up behind me, much faster than before. I kept shouting my husband's name, and Milo's barking grew louder and louder. My husband ran toward me but was still far when I heard the man try to grab me again, this time pulling on my shirt. The fabric stretched so much I thought it would rip. I stumbled but managed to regain my balance and kept running, almost out of breath. When I got close enough to the car, my husband positioned himself directly between me and the man. He wasn't armed, didn't have anything in his hands, but just his presence seemed to make the man hesitate. He stopped for a second, as if calculating whether it was still worth continuing. It was the first time I really saw his face under the rest area lights. He had an extremely ordinary face, nothing remarkable, but there was something in his eyes, something fixed, hollow, as if he wasn't really looking at me, but through me. That detail still chills me today. Milo was barking so loudly that the whole situation turned into chaos. Noise, heavy breathing, footsteps on asphalt. The man took one step back, then another, without taking his eyes off me. While my husband pulled me farther toward the car, the man simply stood there in the middle of the lot, his chest rising and falling slowly, as if catching his breath, but without showing any real exhaustion. It was strange. He had just chased me, but he didn't look sweaty, didn't look winded. He just stood there staring at us with an expression that didn't convey anything, no emotion I could recognize. My husband yelled, asking what he wanted, but the man didn't answer. Not a sound. Instead, he stepped to the side, as if waiting for us to move so he could act again. It was one of those moments when you suddenly understand with absolute clarity that the situation is more dangerous than your brain had allowed you to accept. My husband told me to get in the car immediately. I opened the door, almost tripping, and Milo jumped into the front seat, still barking nonstop. As I closed the door, I looked through the window and saw the man slowly turning his head to the left, as if he'd heard something behind the trucks. It was such a subtle movement that if I had blinked, I would have missed it. And then he simply was gone, in seconds. He turned around and walked quickly back into the space between the two semi-trucks, disappearing into the darkness of that narrow corridor between the trailers. My husband ran to the front of the car and kept staring in that direction, waiting for the man to come out the other side. But nothing happened. No shadow, no footsteps, no metallic sound. It was as if he had just evaporated inside that gap. My husband stayed outside for a few seconds, trying to see any movement between the trucks. He even took a step toward them, but I screamed for him not to go. It felt like every part of my body knew something was wrong, that the way the man vanished so quickly was unnatural. The space between the trailers was narrow, barely enough for someone to pass without brushing against the metal, and yet we hadn't heard a single sound. No steps, no scraping, nothing. The rest area lighting cast deep shadows there, and the darkness in that strip felt thick, unmoving. My husband took a few steps back without turning his back to the trucks, as if afraid that he'd missed something moving in the dark. I just kept repeating, "Get in the car, get in the car," shaking from head to toe. When he finally got in and locked the doors, we stayed still for a few seconds. I could barely breathe. Milo's body was stiff, staring directly at the space between the trucks, growling softly. A different growl, the kind he only makes when he truly senses danger. My husband started the car but didn't put it in drive right away. He kept watching the rear view and side mirrors, trying to see if the man would appear from some angle. But nothing happened. No silhouette, no movement, no sound suggesting someone was running between the trucks or trying to come out. It seemed impossible that he had simply disappeared. But that was exactly what had happened. After about 30 seconds of absolute tension, my husband finally put the car in gear and we began to pull away slowly, without taking our eyes off that dark corridor. As we drove off, I expected to see the man coming out from behind the trucks or running alongside them, but nothing happened. The rest area looked completely empty, as if we had been alone there the whole time. My husband sped up a little and I kept looking through the rear window, waiting and almost begging for any sign of movement, any clue about where the man could have gone. But the space between the trailers stayed dark and still, like no one had ever been there. As we neared the exit of the rest area, we noticed that the headlights that had flashed earlier were completely off now. No light, no sound of cooling engines, nothing. It was as if everything had paused after he disappeared. At the exit, my husband stopped the car for a moment and asked if I wanted to call the police. I said yes, but my voice was trembling, and I struggled to explain what had happened when the dispatcher answered. She asked for a physical description, the direction the man had gone, whether he appeared armed. Anything they could use. All I could repeat was that he had disappeared between two parked trucks. The silence from the dispatcher was almost worse than the situation itself. She finally said she would send a patrol car to check the area, but her tone made it clear there wasn't much they could do. We didn't know the model of the trucks, didn't know the license plates, and didn't know where he went. It was like trying to describe a shadow that had a life of its own. We drove back onto the highway almost in silence. Milo eventually stopped growling but stayed restless, turning his head toward the windows as if still searching for the man. I tried to steady my breathing, but my hands were tingling and I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, as though my body was still stuck in the moment he tried to grab me. My husband kept saying, "It's okay, it's over," but the way he gripped the steering wheel told me he was shaken too. About 10 minutes later, when we finally saw other headlights on the road, the feeling of being watched began to fade. But every rest area we passed afterward gave me the same chill, as if he could be hiding behind any truck, waiting for another unsuspecting person to come back from the bathroom alone. When we got to the hotel that night, I finally managed to cry, not because he physically hurt me, but because the feeling of intention, the clear intention to do something to me, stayed with me in a way I never expected. To this day, I don't know who he was, whether he was waiting for someone specific or simply taking advantage of the isolation of that place. The police called the next day saying they hadn't found anyone, that the rest area cameras didn't show the man going in any direction. Only two shadows moving quickly between the trucks. Nothing conclusive. Nothing useful. Since then, I never go alone into a rest area again, not even for a minute. And every time I see two semi-trucks parked side by side, forming that narrow corridor between them, my entire body reacts as if I'm back in Colorado that night, with someone emerging from the darkness, speeding up, focused solely on me. Story 4. I was driving home from college along I-70 on a long stretch between Kansas and Colorado, already late, almost midnight. I never liked driving that late, but my class ran long and I wanted to arrive before sunrise. My gas tank was almost empty, so I stopped at the first station that showed up on the GPS. From a distance, it looked open, but when I got closer, I noticed the main building was completely dark. The doors locked, only the pump still working. That alone made me uncomfortable, but I was miles from the next station, so I decided to fill up quickly and leave. There were no other cars except for a semi-truck parked sideways, as if it had been shut off for hours. The place had that strange kind of silence. No music, no indoor lights, just the wind hitting the old, flickering sign. As soon as I started fueling, I heard heavy footsteps behind the truck. That's when I saw a man walking around the side of the semi. He wore a bright red cap, the faded kind that's been worn under the sun for years, and a dirty brown jacket. He didn't look drunk or confused, and he looked alert, too alert. He walked slowly toward me, staring the entire time, never looking away. I tried not to stare back, pretending to focus on the pump display, but I could feel him getting closer every second. When he reached the other side of the pump, he just stood there as if waiting for me to finish. He didn't say hi, didn't ask anything, just watched me like he was evaluating every move I made. My whole body tensed up without me even understanding why. I just knew I needed to finish quickly. When the tank finally filled, my only thought was to get into the car as fast as possible. I pulled the nozzle out, placed it back in the holder, and practically ran to the driver's door. The man walked around the pump at the exact same time, as if synchronized with me. He didn't speak, but the way he positioned himself, always in my path, always too close, made it obvious it wasn't a coincidence. I opened the car door with a shaking hand. As soon as I put one leg inside, I heard footsteps speeding up behind me. Before I could pull the door shut, his hand came into the gap, strong, firm, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. I felt the weight of his hand against the door and froze instantly. He was close enough that I smelled the strong scent of oil and cigarettes on his jacket. I pushed the door with all the strength I had, but he held it for a second that felt much longer than it really was. He didn't yell, didn't threaten me, but his expression was terrifyingly neutral, like he was simply carrying out something he had already decided on. My heart was beating so hard I could hear the blood in my ears. He tried to lean forward to look inside the car and said something very quietly, something I didn't understand, but the tone sent me into panic. I hit the accelerator instinctively, even with the door still half open, and the car lurched forward. That made him lose his balance for a moment, just enough for him to let go. I yanked the door shut and it slammed completely. I locked the doors that same second without thinking. When I looked in the side mirror, he was already running back toward the semi-truck's cab. I sped out so fast that my tires screeched on the cracked asphalt of the station. My hands felt weak, like they were functioning only on adrenaline. When I reached the exit, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw him climb into the truck cab, with a speed that didn't match how slowly he had moved before. He slammed the cab door shut, and for a moment I thought the truck's lights would turn on immediately. I was shaking so hard I almost missed the turn back onto the highway. The dark road ahead felt like the only safe thing in the world at that moment. I just wanted distance, as far as possible, as fast as possible. I gripped the steering wheel too tightly and kept my foot heavy on the gas, but it took nearly 2 miles for me to realize I had been holding my breath. When I finally inhaled deeply, I looked in the rear view again. The station entrance was still faintly visible, lit by the dying sign, but I didn't see the truck moving. No headlights, no engine noise, nothing. Even so, I couldn't stop watching the mirror. Part of me expected to see those headlights appear out of nowhere behind me, like he had decided to follow me. The possibility alone made my shoulders tense, as if I were trying to shrink into invisibility on my own road. I picked up my phone to tell my boyfriend I'd be arriving later than planned, but my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the device. The fear didn't come only from what had happened. It came from the clarity that the man tried to open the door with me inside. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a mistake. It was intention. I drove for about 10 more minutes until I finally saw the lights of another station. This one clearly open, busy, brightly lit. I stopped there just to breathe and try to process what had happened. When I got out of the car, my legs felt weak, like they had lost part of their strength. I walked into the convenience store pretending to be normal, but the clerk immediately noticed something was wrong. I asked if she knew whether the previous station was still operating, and she frowned before I even finished the question. She said that place had been closed for months, that no one should be working there, and that the pumps had been deactivated. I froze. I had fueled up. The pump worked. The sound, the click, the display, everything was normal. For a few seconds I tried convincing myself I had mixed up the exit, but I knew I hadn't. With my voice still shaking, I quickly explained what had happened. She called the manager, who called the police without even asking for more details. While they talked, I stood near the door, staring out at the darkness of the highway as if something could appear at any moment. The manager mentioned that other drivers had reported strange activity at that closed station, but that patrols never found anyone there when they arrived. That made my stomach twist. The police asked for my location, my car's plate number, a description of the man and the semi, but I barely remembered details. Just the red cap and his expression, that empty, fixed expression, like he had been waiting for me to give him the opportunity he wanted. When I finally got back into my car, I checked every door twice before starting the engine. I didn't trust the silence inside the vehicle. Even after leaving the second station, I drove with my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. Every distant headlight made me tense, and every curve made me hold my breath automatically. I knew it was unlikely he had followed me. I would have seen the truck move. But the fact that he tried to stop the door, moved so quickly, and was at a supposedly abandoned station, all of that made me feel like I wasn't truly far from danger. The stretch of I-70 was almost empty, just a few cars passing every several minutes. Every shadow on the road, every parked truck on the shoulder looked suspicious. The adrenaline was still so strong that I couldn't judge my speed properly. I had to ease off the accelerator several times because I didn't realize how fast I was going. When I reached the town where I planned to sleep, I parked at the hotel and sat for a few seconds, still holding the steering wheel, unable to turn off the engine. The silence inside the car felt too loud, like my body was expecting another shock, another scare, another sudden movement. I locked the doors before even taking off my seatbelt. On my way to the front desk, I looked back several times, half expecting to see a red semi-truck pulling into the lot. But there was nothing. In the room, still with the police on speakerphone, I went over everything again, this time slower, while the hotel clerk tried to calm me down. When I mentioned that the pump had worked normally, the officer on the line fell silent for a few seconds before saying that this was exactly the type of report they were trying to investigate, something that shouldn't be there, but kept appearing. The next morning, the police called me saying they'd gone to the station. They confirmed that the building was indeed closed, locked from the inside, with no power connected and no recent inspection records. The fuel pumps were officially deactivated, yet somehow one of them appeared to have been used recently. The same one I had stopped at. They didn't find the truck driver nor the semi-truck I described. The cameras in the area showed no truck entering or leaving during the time I was there. That was the part that made me feel sick. I saw the truck. I saw the man get out. I felt his hand on my car door. None of it was imagined. But according to any official record, it was as if that person had never existed that night. I still drive along I-70 sometimes, but I never stop at any station that looks even slightly empty. My boyfriend jokes that I'm paranoid about truckers in parking lots, but I don't care. His red cap is burned into my memory as a warning, a reminder that some situations seem normal until the exact second they aren't. And that on the road you can be completely alone even with lights on and pumps working. To this day, whenever I pass long, dark exits where abandoned stations appear on the edges of the highway, my whole body goes on alert. And every time I remember the strength of his hand holding the door, one thing is painfully clear. I wouldn't have had time to react if I had hesitated even 1 second longer. Story 5. Travis and I were sharing the same truck that week to save time. It was a long route cutting through a very remote part of Georgia, where the road passes through stretches of forest so dense you can barely see the sky. It was already past 2 in the morning when we hit a section completely without lighting, just our truck's headlights carving a narrow tunnel through the dark. I was driving and Travis was in the passenger seat, half awake, half dozing, holding a cup of cold coffee. The road was so silent you could hear every vibration of the engine. No houses, no reflective signs, not even those animal eyes that sometimes shine from the brush. Just darkness on both sides. I'd driven isolated roads before, but this one felt different, like we were entering a place no one had crossed in a long time. That's when something huge appeared out of nowhere at the edge of the headlights. At first I thought it was a barn or a tractor parked off the road, but within seconds I realized it was a semi-truck slowly emerging from the woods, literally coming out from between the trees, with no headlights, no lights at all. It crept onto the road as if it had been waiting for the exact moment we passed. I hit the brakes on reflex and Travis snapped awake, asking what was happening. The truck pulled in behind us so close I could see its massive silhouette shaking with every bump in the road. The strangest part wasn't that it was there, it was the fact that it was completely dark. No lights, no reflectors, nothing. It followed us as if it could see perfectly in the darkness. I sped up a little to see if it would back off, but it kept the same distance, way too close for a stretch that dark. Travis turned around in his seat to take a better look and could only say, "It doesn't have headlights." That confirmed what I already knew, but hearing it out loud made everything feel worse. By then my hands were sweating on the wheel. A semi-truck that size on that kind of road has no reason whatsoever to be driving without lights, especially glued to the back of another truck. As we continued, I noticed small movements in its shadow, as if something were shaking the body panels or shifting along its side. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the driver had electrical problems, Maybe he was trying to reach a station. But none of that explained how it had come literally out of the woods with no side road, no clearing. Nothing. After about 2 minutes of that tension, we heard the first sound. It wasn't the engine, and it wasn't tires on the pavement. It was a dry, repetitive sound. Tuck, tuck, tuck. The noise came from the side of our cab on the passenger side. Travis froze. He turned his head toward me slowly, like he was afraid to make any sudden movement, and asked if I heard it too. I couldn't answer. The knocks grew stronger, like someone was hitting the metal with an open hand. Insistent, demanding. The truck behind us gave no space at all. If I braked, it would hit us. If I accelerated, it stayed right there. All I could think was that someone was way too close, maybe clinging to the side while that dark truck followed us. Travis pressed his face to the window to try to see something in the darkness, but there was nothing. Our headlights didn't reach the side, and the truck behind us was completely dark, so everything was just shadow. The knocks became faster, almost impatient, as if someone was deliberately trying to get our attention. I could feel the vibration through the door, like whoever, or whatever, was hitting it was using enough force to leave a mark. There was no traffic at all. We were completely alone on that narrow road surrounded by forest. I tried to change lanes, but there was no real shoulder, just a thin strip of dirt that could barely support the truck without tipping it. My body stayed locked on the wheel, and Travis kept repeating, "Don't stop, for the love of God, don't stop." At every curve, it sounded like the noise shifted position, as if something moved along the cab, scraping or striking different spots. It wasn't the metallic clang you hear when a branch hits the truck. It was softer, more controlled, like a human hand. I had no idea how anyone could be out there, hanging on in that pitch-black darkness with the truck behind us pressing in. Travis started searching the GPS for an exit, but there was nothing for miles. All he could say was, "This doesn't make sense. He shouldn't be able to drive like that." And he was right. A dark semi-truck glued to us, never misjudging the distance, never drifting even an inch, as if it could see far more than we could. At one moment, the knock stopped abruptly. The silence was so sudden it felt more threatening than the noise. Travis and I stayed frozen, trying to understand whether it was just a pause or whether it was over for good. The only thing that didn't change was the massive shadow of the truck behind us, matching every movement. I tried easing off the gas just a little, to see if it would slow down too. It did, exactly in the same proportion. No delay, no hesitation. It was like we were tethered to a dark mirror with no real control over anything. Travis started speaking in a lower voice, as if afraid someone outside could hear him despite the noise of the engine. He said that if this were just a driver, he would have already signaled, flashed his lights, done anything normal. But nothing about this was normal. When the road finally widened into a narrow dirt shoulder, tiny but better than nothing, I decided we had to break away from it. I turned the wheel carefully and steered the truck right, hoping the other vehicle would pass us. But that's not what happened. The second I pulled onto the shoulder, the dark truck vanished into the darkness behind us. It didn't brake, didn't swerve, didn't pass on the left. It simply stopped existing. Travis kept repeating, "Where is it? Where is it?" while checking the mirrors, but all we saw behind us was dense forest and absolute darkness. I sat still for a few seconds, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. That's when we heard another sound, a soft talk from outside. A single knock. When Travis opened the door to look, there were handprints on the metal, as if someone had pressed their palm hard against the truck right there in the middle of that unlit road. The prints were clear even in the dim light. 5 distinct fingers and a full palm, pressed firmly into the door. The strangest part was the height. The handprint was too high for someone standing on the ground to reach easily, but too low to be from someone hanging from the top. It was a position that simply didn't make sense. Travis ran his fingers over the mark and said it was still warm. That sent a chill through me so strong it made my stomach flip. I kept staring at the tree line, waiting for movement, any movement, but there was no sound of branches breaking. Nothing. Just that empty road that minutes ago felt too small for 2 trucks, and now felt far too big for just the 2 of us. I told Travis to get in and slam the door. He was pale, rigid, repeating over and over that there was no way that truck could have disappeared so fast without leaving a trace. I put the truck in gear and eased back onto the road, checking the mirrors every 2 seconds. It felt like something was still close by, just waiting for us to let our guard down. As we kept driving, I realized I was breathing shallowly, like I couldn't pull enough air in. Travis wasn't talking either. He was clutching the company radio so hard the plastic was creaking. We drove like that in complete silence for several minutes. No headlights behind us, no noise, no sign of where that truck had gone. And still a physical sensation, so strong it felt instinctive that we weren't alone. When we finally reached an area with some streetlights, we both breathed as if coming up from underwater. We pulled into an open station and stayed inside the cab for a few minutes, too shaken to get out. I kept turning the radio on and off, listening for anything. A noise on the highway, a large truck passing, a familiar metallic roar. Nothing. Travis took a photo of the handprint and sent it to our supervisor, who told us not to drive that rural stretch again during the night. He mentioned that other drivers had reported a dark truck following closely, but no one had ever identified the vehicle by plate or model. It always appeared out of nowhere and always vanished the same way. And in most of the reports, there were marks left on the body afterward. We slept at that same station, parked near other trucks because neither of us was in any condition to go back on the road that night. Even surrounded by light and people, the tension stayed in my muscles like something had attached itself to the feeling of that dark road. To this day, whenever I drive through rural Georgia in the early hours, I turn the music down, switch off cruise control, and stay fully alert. Not because I believe in road stories, but because I know exactly what it's like to have something massive behind you, close enough to hear human knocks on the metal, and then watch it disappear as if it had never existed. And every time I look at the photo of that handprint saved on Travis's phone, I remember the same thing. Someone was there, way too close to us. Story 6. I was driving through Kansas, heading back from a long visit with my family, and decided to stop at a cheap roadside motel because I was too exhausted to drive another hour. It was one of those simple motels with ground floor rooms lined up side by side, flickering yellow lights, and the smell of damp carpet in the hallway. I took the first available room, tossed my backpack in the corner, and lay down almost fully dressed, just wanting to sleep a few hours before continuing my trip. I think I fell asleep too fast because when I woke up, it felt like I had been yanked out of a dream, without knowing where I was for a second. The glow of the digital clock read 3:07 a.m. The room was completely silent except for the distant sound of trucks passing on the highway. I was about to turn over when I heard 3 knocks on the window. It wasn't wind, it wasn't accidental. They were firm knocks like someone was calling. My room was on the ground floor with the window facing the parking lot, so my first reaction was irritation, thinking someone had knocked on the wrong room. But when I pulled the curtain slightly to look outside, my whole body went cold. A trucker was standing there, practically pressed against the glass, smiling as if we were in the middle of a conversation I had forgotten. He lifted his hand slowly as if waving, and said something I only understood when I cracked open the small vent window. "Hey man, can you talk for a minute?" His voice was way too calm for the hour, too calm for the way he had appeared there. I could see his face better when the dim hallway light reflected on the glass. Unshaven beard, dirty cap, eyes slightly narrowed as if he were analyzing every detail about me. He placed both hands on the window, leaning his face closer to try to see inside the room. "You look like someone I know," he said, still smiling. That made my stomach twist because there was absolutely no chance I knew that man. I told him I couldn't talk, that I was sleeping and needed to rest. He didn't move. He just kept smiling in that strange way, standing there at the window as if it were normal. Then he said, "Open up just for a second, I want to ask you something." I didn't open it. If anything, I slowly closed the vent window and locked it, trying not to show that I was starting to panic. The curtain was still slightly open and I saw his smile vanish instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch inside him. His expression hardened, his face went serious, and then he gripped the window more firmly, testing the lock. "Open it, it'll be quick," he insisted, this time in a lower tone. My heart was beating so loudly it felt like it echoed through the whole room. He pulled on the window once, twice, 3 times, not violently but insistently, like someone who had all night to try and no fear of being seen. I took a step back without even realizing it, trying to think, trying to understand why he was there at that hour. why he wanted so badly for me to open the window. I tried to find my phone in the darkness, but my hand was shaking so much I dropped it onto the carpet. As I bent down to pick it up, I heard the window rattle again, this time harder. The trucker pressed his face against the glass and said something that completely froze me. "I swear I know you, just let me see better." The way he spoke didn't sound confused. It sounded certain, like he was convinced of something that made no sense at all. The glass began to creak as he tried to force the frame, testing it point by point as if searching for the weak spot. I stayed crouched there with the phone in my hand, wondering whether to call the front desk or the police directly. At the same time, I was afraid to make any noise that would let him know I was still close to the window. Then he started knocking again. Not fast, not violently, but slowly, like he was keeping a rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Each knock made the glass vibrate. I could feel it through the floor. He was that close. When I finally managed to dial the front desk, my hands were so sweaty I almost dropped the phone again. Before anyone answered, I heard his voice one last time, now without any smile. "Open up, man, I just want to talk, just a minute." The sentence sounded wrong, way too wrong, for someone standing in the dark knocking on a motel window at 3 a.m. I backed farther away, and that's when I noticed his shadow shift to the side, as if he were trying to find a better angle through the small gap in the curtain. The front desk finally picked up, but the clerk's voice was groggy, like he was working alone on the night shift. I tried to explain quickly, saying a trucker was knocking on my window and trying to force the lock. He asked for my room number and said he would take a look, but before I could ask him to come immediately, the trucker made the most unsettling move of the night. He crouched down completely, disappearing from the window's view. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear gravel, didn't hear breathing, and nothing. Just absolute silence outside. That froze me so completely I didn't even notice the clerk asking if I was still on the line. I couldn't respond. I couldn't do anything. The way the man vanished so quickly, so close to the glass, seemed deliberate, like he was trying to get a better angle or waiting for me to get close again. 10 seconds later, I heard a dull sound at the bottom of the window. Not a slap. More like someone pressing their palm against the glass, testing its strength. Then came another shove, harder. The metal frame trembled. I took 3 steps back without realizing it and hit the edge of the bed, my legs almost giving out. I turned on the room lights, hoping it would make him back away. The lit side of the window revealed something that made my blood run cold. His handprint smeared along the edge of the glass, fingers fully spread. His shadow was still there, pressed against the wall, but I couldn't see his face. Only his silhouette moving slowly, as if deciding his next step. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Fast footsteps and a low voice speaking into a radio. The moment those sounds approached my room, the trucker disappeared again. He didn't run, he didn't walk away. He vanished. My door shook when the clerk knocked, probably more frightened than he let on. I only opened after checking the peephole twice. He was a skinny young guy, tense expression, holding a small flashlight. He asked where the trucker went, and I could only point to the window. He stepped outside and swept the flashlight across the whole parking lot. There was no one. The semi-truck I had seen earlier, a dirty white model with a long trailer, was gone too. No engine noise, no brake lights pulling away, no fresh tire marks on the pavement. The clerk kept shining the light as if expecting the man to appear behind a pillar, but the lot was completely empty. The only things that remained were the handprints on the window and the feeling that everything had happened too fast. I went back inside while he did another sweep, and only then did I notice my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I tried calling the police, but the clerk asked me to wait a few minutes because he wanted to check the cameras first. When he returned, his face looked different, more serious, more nervous. He said there was no footage of anyone approaching my window. Nothing. The camera overlooking that row of rooms showed my car, the lit area, trucks passing on the highway in the background, and nothing else. No figure near the window, no movement, no human shape at all. I insisted, reminding him of the handprint on the glass, but he just shook his head, genuinely unsure how it was possible. "I believe you," he said, "but there's no footage." After he left, I locked the door with everything I could, the deadbolt, the chain, even pushed the dresser forward a few inches without thinking. I left the bathroom light on because I didn't want a single dark corner. Every noise from the parking lot made my heart jump, especially the distant sound of trucks on the highway, because each engine made me think he might come back. I tried sitting on the bed, but my legs were shaking too much. I kept staring at the window, waiting to see his silhouette appear again, or hear that slow knocking that felt more like a warning than a request. The handprint was still perfectly clear on the glass, lit by the exterior lamp as if it had been left there seconds ago. I didn't sleep after that. I kept getting up, pulling the curtain just a little, checking the entire parking lot with the same feeling of being watched, even knowing no one was out there. A part of me tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was having some kind of episode, maybe he mistook me for someone else, maybe he was drunk. But none of that matched the calculated way he tried forcing the window, or the speed with which he vanished the moment he heard footsteps in the hallway. And what disturbed me the most was the phrase he repeated twice. "You look like someone I know." There was no way that was a coincidence. No way it was a simple mistake at 3 in the morning outside a nearly empty motel. Around 5 a.m., when the sky started to lighten, I finally gathered the courage to go to the front desk. The night clerk had already been replaced by an older woman who seemed to have worked there for years. I told her what happened and showed her the handprint, but she didn't seem surprised and only concerned. She said travelers occasionally reported people wandering around the ground floor rooms, but they had never identified anyone. She asked if I had seen the man's truck and if I remembered the color or model. When I described it, she frowned and said something "No one with
a truck like that
checked in tonight. In fact, no one parked here since before you arrived." She showed me the guest list, and it was true. No names, no vehicles matching what I'd seen. Before checking out, I walked the parking lot one more time, just to be sure he wasn't hiding somewhere. I moved slowly along the row of rooms, the early light barely illuminating the pavement. No semi-truck anywhere, just small cars, dusty from travel, and an old pickup near the maintenance area. No recent tire marks, no sign of movement. When I returned to my car, I noticed something that made the unease settle even deeper. There was dust built up around the space where I had seen the truck parked earlier. Undisturbed dust. Uniform. No sign of a vehicle ever having been there. It was as if nothing had occupied that space during the entire night. I stood there staring at it, feeling that strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that he wasn't close anymore. Dread because I knew with absolute certainty that everything had really happened. Before leaving, I asked to see the footage again, just to have some external confirmation that the man existed. The clerk hesitated, but eventually let me. We watched the recording from around the time he knocked on my window. The camera showed the quiet parking lot, the dim lights, the row of rooms in my car exactly where I remembered it. But no one approached the window. No one walked by. No shadows, nothing. What did appear, though, was a small movement in my curtain, me stepping backward away from the window. My throat closed when I realized that on the recording, it looked like I was reacting to nothing. The clerk put her hand on her chest, not like someone doubting me, but like someone who didn't know what to do with what she was seeing. "I believe you," she repeated, "but I don't know what was here tonight." I left that motel with the sun already high, but feeling no sense of safety. I drove for minutes with the window closed and the doors locked, looking at every truck on the highway as if I might see that same man inside, smiling, waiting for me to stop again. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted from me or why he said I looked like someone he knew. I don't know how he disappeared so fast or why the camera didn't capture him. But I know how hard he tried to open my window. I know the fixed, insistent look in his eyes and the unsettling calmness in his voice. Since that night, I've never stayed in a ground floor room facing a parking lot again. And every time I wake up at 3 in the morning in a roadside motel, no matter how small the noise outside, my body reacts the same way. As if someone might be smiling on the other side of the glass.
I'm really grateful for staying until the last minute. It's always good to know that you're here, listening to every detail. If you liked it, comment which part was the scariest for you. And of course, sign up to keep listening to stories as dark as this one. See you in the next video.